Joining us now for World Brief and the review of some of the headlines of today's newspapers from around the world is Adefemi Akinsanya. Good morning, Adefemi.
Good morning, Dr. Rubin. Good morning, Ayo. Good morning, Rufai. It feels so good to be in your presence once again.
In the studio today with us.
Goodness gracious.
Oko Mamai.
That's me.
Femi Femu. Oko Mamai.
That's me. That's me. I am truly my mother's husband. Let us look at the World Brief, and without a doubt, the number one global news story is, of course, the ongoing #EndBadGovernance protest happening across Nigeria right now. Arise News, as they did yesterday, will continue keeping you abreast of what's happening across the country during these demonstrations as they enter their second day. Let's move on now to Donald Trump's appearance at the National Association of Black Journalists annual convention on Wednesday. It was already going to be a hotspot of controversy, and then he took the stage. And boy, what a sight it was. Now, Trump arrived more than an hour late to the panel, which was moderated by ABC, Rufai, please, which was moderated by ABC's Rachel Scott, Harris Faulkner, who is from Fox News, and Kadia Goba, who is a politics reporter at Semaphore. Now, it's been reported that Trump had demanded that the NABJ organizers not go through with live fact-checking during the discussion and was in a somewhat standoff with organizers before the event took place. A live fact-check of Trump's comments was still featured as planned. And when he did finally appear on stage, almost immediately, and then throughout the 33 minutes or so he was on stage, the former president took aim at the moderators. He renewed a vow to pardon January 6th insurrection defendants, and then he also questioned Kamala Harris's race, accusing her of only recently choosing to identify as a black person. Let's take a listen.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She has always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't, because she was Indian all the way, and then all of a sudden she made a turn and she became a black person.
Just to be clear, sir, do you believe that she is...
I think somebody should look into that too when you ask, continue in a very hostile, nasty tone.
Well, Trump today has doubled down on those comments that he made, releasing this post on Truth. He says he shows a picture of a younger Kamala Harris, and she's been pictured alongside her family, dressed in traditional Indian attire. And the caption on the post reads, "Your warmth, friendship, and love of your Indian heritage are very much appreciated." That is, of course, a post from Donald Trump. Again, doubling down on his comments about how Kamala Harris has only just recently chosen to be black and she was Indian beforehand, as though mixed heritage is something that is far-fetched and unheard of in this world. Well, let's stay in the United States, and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has released a statement saying the US government has recognized Edmundo Gonzalez as the winner of last weekend's presidential elections in Venezuela. The US announcement followed calls from multiple governments, including close allies of incumbent Nicolas Maduro, for Venezuela's National Electoral Council to release detailed vote counts as it has done during previous elections. The electoral body declared Maduro the winner on Monday, but the main opposition coalition revealed hours later that it did have the evidence to prove that they had won more than 2/3 of the tally sheets that each electronic voting machine printed after the polls closed. And then we move on to the United States and the fact that US and Russia have completed their biggest prisoner swap in post-Soviet history on Thursday, with Moscow releasing Wall Street journalist Evan Gershkovich and fellow American Paul Whelan in a multinational deal that set 24 people free. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris were also there to greet them when they returned. And then lastly, earlier this week, former cabinet member Kemi Badenoch formally entered the race to become leader of the Conservative Party. Now, just yesterday, reports have emerged saying Badenoch asked officials to pay for a holiday flight with taxpayers' money to the United States while in government. But that request was rebuffed by her former department's top civil servants. That is according to The Guardian. Now, officials at the Department for Business and Trade ended up booking her a ticket to Texas for the family holiday, but sources then claimed that the cabinet minister did in fact cover the cost of that flight herself. Just to remind you, reports say the MP has also used her ministerial car for gym trips, and she has also ordered advisors to run personal errands and Just to remind you, the Ministerial Code in the United Kingdom states that ministers are expected to uphold the highest standards of propriety and must not ask civil servants to act in conflict with their own code of conduct, including with public funds. Do you think that while we can't say that this is not untrue news, sometimes there can be a political aspect to these types of information? If she's come out this week to say that she formally wants to declare her intention to lead the Conservative Party, it's somehow that this conversation happens a few days after that. It should have happened at the time. I think people would have been happy to hear that at the time. But this is the menu of issues that we're looking at across the world. What are your thoughts?
Truth is, those things should be investigated. About Kerry Badenoch, I've got nothing against that, because if you remember the big MP scandal about people using government money to do all sorts, but truth also has to be said. With politics will come smear. Just like what they're doing to Kamala Harris now. All of a sudden, when Trump was donating to Kamala's campaign to be an attorney general, he forgot she was African-American then. Yeah. And for all the naysayers, because I see the right-wing bandwagon has started to open their big balloony mouths now, people like Candace Owen and the likes are saying, oh, she was identified as the first Indian-American senator and all of that. Don't forget, Kamala, at some point, Candace Owen said something that was entirely wrong. She said, oh, she never grew up with her father. She was always with her mother, so she has that inherent. It's a lie. Right. In Kamala's words, there were times that she went to Jamaica on holidays when there was a big indoctrination into reggae music and reggae culture. Right. Because her father, Donald Harrison, was really Jamaican. So they've looked for everything to talk about the lady they can't see.
Her mother was a problem. I just feel like
that's their problem. Her mother is a big cancer specialist. Her father is a Stanford professor of economics that has even been captured on C-SPAN. Right. So they're just looking for also. So Trump will talk about race and everything. It just shows that they're empty and jobless. Femi, I deliberately stated the story of Juan Guaido and the same person, Maduro, when they had that big kerfuffle the last
election, yes.
Because this was how America started, by recognizing Guaido. In fact, 60 countries followed suit, but it never worked in the end. The political crisis petered out. Yes. So will this peter out? Will the Venezuelan people truly summon the inner spirit of Simon Bolivar and be revolutionary in their master and say, done with Chavismo movement and Maduro? Only time will tell. But it's not far-fetched. America will always recognize the opposition in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, they're worried about the socialism and the communism happening, so-called in Venezuela, aren't they?
Okay, so starting off with Trump and his interview with the black journalists. The first thing I would say is that I don't know why both parties bothered with the interview. Because in fairness, number one, he doesn't really bother about black voters. I don't think he's interested in getting their votes because that was a disaster. I don't think it was going to change. In fact, people who were considering, that is, people of black and minor ethnic groups might reconsider their options. Right. And then also on the side of the journalists, the first question obviously showed that they didn't bring him up to come and button him up. Yes, it was really just an opportunity to just cut him, tear him down, and face him with some of his derogatory comments around, with black people. So I don't know why they bothered and all that, but, well, it showed him up. Then the second part is that statement, I have a different perspective with regards to him saying, no, he didn't know that. I felt, and I'm not holding brief for Trump, that it's saying, what he was trying to demonstrate was that she was playing the black card. When was convenient, yes, when was convenient for her, then she was now pushing the fact that her dad is from Jamaica, whereas we know that she has her parents are not together, so she was raised by her mom. She has a closer relationship and closer ties to her Indian side, but it doesn't change that at any point. That's it's not the black card; it's the advantage of being mixed. You can choose. It doesn't take away.
This is somebody who graduated from an HBCU,
and that's why exactly. So that's why he was saying. So I felt he was just trying to show up the fact that don't be deceived. All of a sudden, when it came to elections, she's now pushing her black side. Right. That's what I felt he was trying to say. And then also in the UK, and I'll stop here, the Tories have been consistently accused of using public funds for a lavish lifestyle. In 2023, the accusation came against Rishi Sunak himself, against some of his ministers, that they were spending money on 5-star hotels, going on holidays, saying they were going to work based on tax. So it's not new. Let's see how it affects our chances as leader of the Conservative Party.
Okay, President Trump said a lot of crazy things at the meeting with the black journalists, and it was booed repeatedly. What are some of the crazy things he said? Trying to make racially derogatory statements. I say I created black jobs. The journalists didn't like that. Like saying he has done more for the black people than any other president in American history. Where does he live? Lyndon Johnson the Equal Rights, Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, or President Clinton. He said, well, he doesn't know whether Kamala Harris is a DEI.
That was the first question.
And then he went after Richard Scott,
yes,
who led the questioning process, calling her horrible, saying that ABC News is a terrible news organization. He was generally contrarian, but he used the phrase dumping down. I don't think it really, dumping down means when you oversimplify an intellectual subject for the benefit of the uneducated or the illiterate. So you bring it down to their level. Now, a book has now been published. It's called The Warning, by the same person who wrote that anonymous article in 2018 about Donald Trump, saying that Donald Trump is a master of dumping down because he doesn't have the capacity to understand complex issues. Yes. And you have to reduce everything to a single subject for him. And once he latches onto one subject, that's what he will be talking about. In other words, this anonymous author, I think the book is reviewed in Washington Post. He say, you want to vote for a president who doesn't have enough brains to carry the weight of the assignment. And so, invariably, it's America itself that is dumping down. However, this dumb man who wants to be a president
again,
is leading in 5 of the 7 battleground states. The only place where Kamala Harris is leading now is in Wisconsin. Now, as for the prisoner swap, well, this is not new. The last time they did business stuff was with Brittany Griner, who was in action yesterday, I think, basketball team of the United States. And now they've done a swap. And President Biden says, it's a feat for diplomacy because those persons who were accused of spying and espionage by Russia, they've been released. But in Russia, too, they are celebrating because Germany has released Christoph, who was a major person that involved in the killing of a Chechen, activist, and Germany jailed him, but now he's been released, and Russia thinks that it is victory. But this does not mean an improvement in the relationship between Russia and the West. It's just a question of every state, looking out for its own people. Indeed. As for the U.S., attacking Maduro, what do you expect the U.S. to say?
Since the beginning.
Machado has an article in the Wall Street Journal today. She says she's in hiding. She's the opposition leader, and that human rights are being violated. And she is insisting that it was Gonzalez that won the election. But we'll see how the situation in Venezuela plays out.
We will too.
Maduro is insisting he won 51% of the
well, let's hope
votes.
he releases those voting counts and to take it from there. Well, let's take a look now at our newspaper headlines across the globe. We'll begin, of course, here in Nigeria with ThisDay newspaper. And the front cover of ThisDay newspaper, of course, is looking at the second day of the hashtag #EndBadGovernance governance protests. Those protests have dominated, in fact, all of the covers of Nigerian papers today. But if we head back to ThisDay, unfortunately, the headline does say that protests have turned violent as 16 people die in Borno State and 6 die in Niger on the first day of protests. In southern Nigeria, Lagos, Ogun State were relatively peaceful in the fact that no fatalities have been reported, though yesterday, as is the case today, the vast majority of business activities has halted or significantly reduced as people continue to stay within their homes. If we move on to the front page of the New Telegraph there, and they first talk about how 500 billion naira's worth of Nigeria's GDP was lost in a single day as protesters in certain areas of the country defied government and marched against hardship. They also discuss, on a smaller section underneath the masthead there, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar. He has called the call for Igbos to leave Lagos and southwest states divisive and urges the federal government to arrest, probe and prosecute promoters. Atiku, in a statement issued on Thursday on his X handle, said that the recent call under the hashtag Igbo Moscow is deeply troubling and fundamentally opposed to the principles of unity and coexistence that define our nation. I'm sure we all agree with him there too. Looking at The Guardian now, the front page of The Guardian talks about how governors have imposed curfews in northern states. But also another story I'd like us to discuss there is that the cost of a healthy diet has risen in the past 6 months by 45%. And that is a greater pace than general inflation and food inflation. And when you look at the cost of a healthy diet increases, those are because of vast increases in the price of vegetables, legumes, nuts, and seeds, as well as starchy staples. Starchy staples, however, on the other hand, they saw the smallest increase in price month to month. And then if we look at the Punch looks at quite a harrowing story of one of the domestic workers of Aribe, who is the slain daughter of Justice Rita Ofili Ajumogobia, who was killed earlier this week. It's believed, according to this report, that one of the 3 people who were arrested on the premises has now admitted to being involved in the murder of her boss. It was on Tuesday night that the body was found and discovered on Wednesday morning outside the gate of her residence in the highbrow area of Ikoyi, I believe it's Parkview Estate. And her 3 domestic employees, which included a house help, a security guard, and a driver, were all arrested in connection to her death. We now look at the Vanguard, looking at these protests, the Nigeria Bar Association, in recognition of the fundamental and guaranteed constitutional rights of citizens in this country, in order for them to assemble and protest. They have set up 140 branches across Nigeria where pro bono legal support services can be deployed for anyone whose fundamental human rights may have been violated as a result of the protests. And then if we move on to an African paper, the Daily Nation of Kenya looks at how 3 cabinet secretary nominees named back into the cabinet by William Ruto yesterday have reportedly seen their personal wealth jump multi-million shillings worth in the less than 2 years they have been in office, meaning that since they would become part of this cabinet, since they've been in office, their wealth has increased exponentially. Let's look at international papers now. The Daily Express, yesterday and the day before, we have been looking at how 3 young girls, as young as 6, 7, and I believe 9 years old, were stabbed at their dance class over the weekend. And now it's emerged that 17-year-old Axel Ruda Kabana has been named, and not only named, he's also been pictured. Axel, 17 years old, was born in Cardiff, so he is British, born in Wales, to parents from Rwanda. And, he's 17 years old. Usually, in situations like this, identities will not be released because they are under 18, but because of the severity of the situation and to avoid a situation where people are rioting, the judge did decide to release his name and identity. So those are our newspapers.
And the good thing is, it's not from any specific, religion, because that was a factor in all of, the troubles back and forth. But
Agreed.
I would like to quickly go to Kenya.
Sure.
You can see the hypocrisy of the Ruto government. So you can see the protesters in Kenya were correct when they were saying these guys have just gone there to enrich themselves. Your personal wealth jumped at the expense of the suffering people in Kenya. And that's why I want to challenge every African leader to take the way of President Bassirou Faye of Senegal, that released his asset declaration form. Through that, we know that he only had 2 cars, 1 house. He had about $37,000 in his bank account. He has a debt of about $80,000.
Right.
If we have more African leaders show us this
of transparency
and be transparent, then we'll go a lot better.
I remember a Nigerian leader who also declared his goats and cattle. I don't know how much of that helped, but I agree with you that it should.
That's sometimes. At least that should transparency.
Was it Buhari who did
How did
that?
that help his government? But let me just. But it's absolutely correct. I'm just saying that sometimes if the system is broken, even if they share or declare their assets, if there's a system that enables corruption, it wouldn't stop it. So we need to fix our systems. But let me. I just wanted to touch, Dr. Batia, very quickly on the incident, on the unfortunate killing of the daughter of Justice Ofili Ajumogobia. Very sad incident, and it was. We see that domestic staff was culpable. I was just going to highlight the importance of the checks that we do for people who come into our homes to look after, especially who have the opportunity to get into our personal spaces. Just those background checks. I don't know how. I know some companies do have more sophisticated ways of checking. We need to do that. It's very sad. It's not. Dayadeleke 2016 reminds me of that. The same park view.
But very quickly, the danger of misinformation, which is also a problem in Nigeria. We've been talking about riots in Nigeria. In Britain at the moment, they're having riots. From Southport to Manchester to Axelford, and this is spreading as a result of misinformation. The young people that died, 876 in Merseyside, a town of Southport, there was this information that they were killed by a Muslim. In the initial days when the 17-year-old boy Axel Rudakubana had not been named. And the British went out, far-right protesters.
Correct, 19
and now they have
threatened
that it will be in 19 cities across the whole of Britain. And the Prime Minister has had to call out, the police and to say that he's going to go after far-right. The danger of misinformation. You just misinform people and you cause problems. So this is what they are dealing with. We have our own riots here. They have their own kind of riot also in England.
Well, thank you so much, Adefemi.
Always a pleasure.
And see you on Monday.